My name is Pam Hall, and this is Earth News. Today's guest is Terry Miller from the Lone Tree Council. Terry Miller is a native of Bay County. He taught at Saginaw City Public Schools for 30 years and has been an adjunct professor of history at Delta College for the past 20 years. He served 2 terms as a Monitor Township trustee and on its Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. In 1978, he and 5 other residents of Bay City founded the Lone Tree Council, a nonprofit environmental group that was formed to oppose the Midland nuclear power plant. With the power plant's cancellation, the group continued to promote cleanup of watershed contamination, defend both coastal and inland wetlands, and most recently educate on global climate change. Lone Tree Council's Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, request to the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, MDEQ, first publicized the extent of dioxin contamination in the Tittabawassee River and floodplain. And today he serves on the leadership team of the Community Advisory Group, CAG, that oversees the Dow U.S. EPA state cleanup. He is also on the board of directors of Bay Sail, Inc., a Bay City-based nonprofit that conducts environmental education on its 2 schooners. So welcome, Terry.
Well, Pam, thank you for having me.
And you are a professor of history.
I am.
Is that environmental history?
I wish it was, Pam. I teach survey classes in both early Western civilization and U.S. history. But the early Western civilization allows me to talk about big history, and I have come to appreciate the role of climate in history, also environment in history. And I always introduce books to my classes, recommendations, in a bibliography, and I usually bring them in, and I'm afraid I'm going to do the same with you.
That is fine, Terry.
I am
These are
going to be
excellent
introducing books as often as I can. And the book that I recommend to my students is called Collapse by UCLA professor of geography by the name of Jared Diamond. He's more famous for his Germs, Guns, and Steel, but Collapse is subtitled How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed. And it's all about the mistakes societies make. And it's a reinforcement that societies have failed in the past. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to see our society, or in fact our globe, fail. Mm-hmm. And it's on the verge. Yeah. So it's scary.
It is. What is the Lone Tree Council?
Good question, Pam. The Lone Tree Council started amazingly 42 years ago. It intended to be a grassroots organization, in fact has been a grassroots organization. It has no paid staff. It has no office. We get out a newsletter on a monthly basis. This is January's, and it tries to sum up some of the concerns that we have, and also let members know what what organizations are meeting. And it is, well, as I said, it's been functioning for 42 years. What we've often done is address hot-button local issues when they come up. I kind of see us as a natural guard, not a national guard, but a natural guard to respond to things. Mm-hmm. For instance, when Consumers Energy decided they wanted to build a clean coal plant, which is an oxymoron. There are no clean coal plants. Mm-hmm. We teamed up with the Sierra Club, and after a very vigorous fight, they decided to back out of that. Mm-hmm. We've also teamed up in the past with Public Interest Research Group in Michigan, PURGEM, to sue Dow Chemical Company for violating their national or federal clean water permit. Mm-hmm. And that was also very successful. So we just stick around.
Well, thank God you're here.
Well, thank you.
So let's talk about climate change. Can you tell our audience briefly what it is?
Okay, I suspect your audience knows what it is. Actually, it's has been a very good thing for literally millennia, because it's that Cinderella aspect, that just perfect combination of water vapor, carbon dioxide, some methane, that has allowed a temperate environment for the human species for a long, long time. For most of our history, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has been about 275 to 280. However, in the 1700s, with the rise of the industrial movement, the steam engine, the steam drill, all those things powered by coal, and then oil, and then the discovery of the turbine and electrification. And now you have a whole industry mining coal and oil, and you could not have picked a worse fuel. Coal is one of the dirtiest, absolutely dirtiest fuels imaginable. There is a very recent book out called The Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells. And if you want to be depressed,
Right.
and I'm sure you don't want to be depressed,
I've read
but it's very informative. And he makes one of the points that stuck with me was that any death is unfortunate, but he says, and he's basing it on evidence, that globally 10,000 people a year die prematurely because of the particulate that has been released by coal, the burning of coal. And we know that all the inland Great Lakes, all the inland, are contaminated with mercury.
Yeah.
And we also know that the residue of burning coal is ash. It's full of arsenic. It's full of radioactive materials. It's a toxic grab bag. And we've got 400 acres right next to Saginaw Bay in Bay City at the Carnwedock facility where it's been stored. So in addition to all those wonderful things, it releases carbon dioxide. And then we get to the hockey stick. As the industrial age continued into the 1800s and 1900s and 20th century and now 21st century, the Earth has struggled to contain these CO2, these carbon dioxide gases, which essentially hold the sun's heat close to the Earth. And now we're up to 412 parts per million of carbon dioxide. And the oceans are getting exhausted. The forested areas, which can absorb some of these things, some of these gases. We're experiencing deforestation. We're seeing the burning of the Amazon. Right. So we are getting very warm, and we're seeing the consequences of that.
And also Australia burning. And
yes.
And there's been some false news out there about that being started by vandals, and that's just not the case.
Yeah. There's no question that the fires in California and the fires in Australia have been exacerbated by global warming. Yes.
Okay, you and your organization began by opposing a nuclear plant in Midland and on swampland, no less. But some climate scientists, such as retired NASA scientist James Hansen, are calling for more nuclear plants because they don't create climate gases such as carbon dioxide. Have you and your group changed your opposition to nuclear power?
Good question, Pam. Have we changed our opposition to nuclear power? No. I should say maybe. And the reason I say that is nuclear power is a very unforgiving technology. Yeah. I mean, if anybody has HBO, they've seen the series on Chernobyl.
Right.
We know what happened in Fukushima, Japan, because it was built where it was. We have our own 3 Mile Island. there is the potential for catastrophic accident. But also, and perhaps even more seriously, nuclear power creates the worst waste that any industry has ever produced.
Right. And where do you
It
put
goes on and on.
Yeah.
Yes, we have
China syndrome, the movie
yes,
China syndrome.
we have
Yeah.
no national repository.
Right.
In fact, that is a hot button issue in Michigan right now, because Canada
Yeah.
is attempting to site a nuclear repository about a little more than a mile from the shores of Lake Huron.
Yeah.
And it is being fought by both of our
Right.
senators and thumb representatives are absolutely opposed to that,
Right.
and rightly so. One of the reasons we fought the Midland nuclear plant was it was built in a swamp. It was, as you
Right.
said, it was built in a floodplain.
That's-
It was sinking.
Right. It's
And
the
yet,
worst place.
one of the things and one of the reasons that dealing with climate change is so difficult is that you've got so much money and political clout behind some of these industries that are so pernicious.
Right.
And Consumers was able to actually freeze the ground underneath that site and continue to try to build it. Now, the only balance to that is the government. But even the government sometimes is helpless depending upon who's in power.
Right.
I'll never forget
The
a
lobbyists.
nuclear regulatory official, an inspector who was responsible for preserving our lives, said that this was a pile of rubble held together with reinforcing rods. And yet
That's
they
scary.
continued to build that.
I hear you.
But fortunately, the large consumers recognized that it was going to be extremely expensive to pay for the electricity that was being generated from
And
that.
that's the bottom line is money, and that's the only reason.
That's the reason it
sad.
continued. We
Very
fought
sad.
that for 6 years. Now, we have no national repository. So as a consequence, we have, and this was recently in the Detroit Free Press, we have 60,000 tons of radioactive material sited on 4 of the Great Lakes, some right near the shore. And it's just sitting there, waiting for whatever. And
we
some
have
48
cancer too.
Yes, 48 million people drink the water from the Great Lakes. So this is a very dangerous
Start
technology.
glowing in the dark here.
Yeah. Now, I qualified my opposition because I've just learned lately that Bill Gates and his engineering team are working on technology that would actually use this stored waste to produce electricity.
And that's why you said maybe. I think I read something about that.
Yeah, there was actually a PBS
That's-
program
Yeah.
on that. And if that, in fact, matured and came to fruition, that could be a win-win.
Yeah.
Get this stuff off the shores of the Great Lakes
Right.
and put it to use. And it doesn't produce carbon dioxide. So I would not be supportive of mining uranium and creating new nuclear plants.
Right.
But if this waste could properly be used, it's ideal.
Right.
It's perfect.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So how worried are you about climate change, and not the historical kind that's good for humanity, but the kind that we're
Right.
seeing right now? I've read that many people have become very anxious about the future, even depressed. Has the issue been overhyped by the media?
That is also a good question. And no, I do not think it has been overhyped. It's clearly of concern, and we've already talked about it. We're seeing the melting of the poles, we're seeing rising waters, we're seeing extreme hurricanes flooding our coastal cities. Prediction is many of those coastal cities will be underwater. We're seeing extreme drought and extreme precipitation in many locations on the globe. And we've already talked about it, but the fires in California, the fires in Australia have been exacerbated by the dry weather as a result of warming. We're also seeing unbelievable warming of the oceans. And we're doing very little about it. We have elected, unfortunately, demagogic leaders around the world, including in this country, that are owned by the fossil fuel industry, that deny the science. And the reality is the last 5 years have been the hottest in human history. And this is getting very serious. I just read that that the last decade, the last 10 years, in the last 10 years, we have pumped more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than all of human history up to John Kennedy's presidency. That is a lot of carbon dioxide.
It is.
And if the poles start melting, the Arctic Circle starts melting, there is a lot of contained methane that will be released. And that could be dire. It could be very, very concerning. It is very, very concerning. We're seeing the results of it. Now, the question was, is it a generational?
That's the next question, but I actually did think of a couple that I was going to ask you before I get to that.
Oh,
if that's
okay.
One
Okay.
is, what do you think of cloud seeding?
I think there's some real dangers to it.
Right.
I think there's some real dangers. We don't know. We just modeled it, and I'm not sure if the science is there yet. There's little question, and I may be getting a little ahead of myself, but clearly one of the things we have to do is keep gas and oil and coal in the ground.
Right.
We cannot continue to burn it. But unfortunately, we're experiencing the carbon dioxide from 20 to 30 years ago.
Right.
We haven't experienced the heavy input that we're experiencing now. That'll be in the future. So one of the things we're going to have to do is extract CO2 from the atmosphere. It's not going to be good enough to stop it.
Right.
We're going to have to reforest areas because the best way is to reforest areas that have been deforested. And we're probably going to have to find some technological solutions that are economically viable to extract CO2 from the atmosphere.
And I just learned that younger trees actually clean up the air faster than older trees.
Yes. Oh,
So
good. I learned something too.
And I also heard that that the prediction is that it's worse than the scientists had previously thought.
Yes, the modeling has been realized, but faster than they thought.
So has the issue become a generational concern? And there's two parts to this, but I'll let you go ahead.
Okay.
With that.
No, I don't think it has, to the extent that the younger generation has recognized that their future is in question if something hasn't been done about this.
Exactly, the Sunrise Movement.
Yes, the Sunrise Movement. But some of us old folks have been working on this for decades.
Yeah.
The scientific community has been screaming about what they see in the modeling.
And even the oil companies knew about it. And then
you're absolutely
they had
absolutely right, Pam.
scientists,
Yes,
and then they covered it up.
They did.
And
But
kept going.
the billions of dollars that are raked in from the coal and oil industry and the support for politicians that deny this succeeded in basically muting all these concerns for decades and decades. Again, one of the finest books
that's a great
is
book.
The Merchants of Doubt. We faced that when we fought the dioxin issue too. But this is about both the cigarette industry and about global climate change, because in both situations, the producers, the manufacturers, knew very well that their product was dangerous. But they used methods to deny that realization and prevent regulation.
Gaslighting.
And they're still doing it today.
Yeah.
Very successfully.
Yeah. So the other part of this question is we've all seen the young teenager Greta Thunberg scold world leaders on their inaction in the creation of a youth-based sunrise movement.
Yeah, she is our hero.
Yes, absolutely.
She was the person of the year.
Right.
And she clearly is a springboard for optimism and hope, because she is generating a lot of concern worldwide with her willingness to go out and speak to power, truth to power. And she is, I get emotional just thinking about.
Well, I remember when Greenpeace came to Midland in the mid-'90s, and I was a college student, and I covered dioxin, and I remember people being so ignorant about dioxin that they said, well, what are the pros and cons of dioxin? I'm like, there is no pros of dioxin.
It's a waste that nobody
and they
wanted.
live here, and they didn't know what it was.
Right.
It was really frightening.
Yes.
So are there things individuals can do to impact climate change?
That is also a very good question. And there are some very obvious ones. The planting of trees, selecting appliances that are very efficient, driving a car that's a hybrid or ideally an electric car, using rooftop solar panels, supporting renewable energy. But there's also a problem with that. And this is where I have to help myself out, because I want to read something.
All right.
Because one of the luxuries that my wife and I provide ourselves is on Sunday we go out and get a New York Times.
Awesome.
And we probably spend 4 days going through everything from the book review.
You can also get it online.
You can, and I do. I check it every day. But in the review section, there was this environmental writer. Her name is Emma Maris. She wrote this column just last Sunday. And here's what she said. And I absolutely agree with her. She said it's so much better than I could have, though. Ditch the shame, she says. The rich and powerful have constructed the systems that make it nearly impossible to live lightly on the earth. The belief that this enormous existential problem could be fixed if all of us just tweaked our consumptive habits is not only preposterous, it's dangerous. It turns eco-saints against eco-sinners, who are really just fellow victims. As long as we are competing for the title of greener than thou, or are paralyzed by shame, we aren't fighting the powerful companies and governments that are the real problem. And that's exactly the way they like it. I thought that was pretty profound.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
That we sometimes, and I think of that movie Cinderella Man. I don't know if do you remember
Cinderella
or you saw
Man?
Cinderella Man,
Okay.
starring Russell Crowe as the fighter James Braddock.
Okay.
And it occurs during the Depression. And everyone, and from teaching the Depression, I know this,
Right.
everyone felt guilty, like they had caused the Depression. And when he got welfare money, he started winning, he took it back. Like it was wrong to accept money from the government.
Yeah.
And a lot of people feel guilty.
That's the same thing with poor people feeling guilty about being poor when they're oppressed to begin
Right.
with. I've
Yes.
had the same thought, but that was wonderfully put, by
Yes.
the way. Thank you
Yes.
for sharing that.
Sure.
That's a
And
good
I'm not
point.
done with her, because we've got, I'm sure, other questions coming up.
Okay. Okay, so the problem is so dire. How do we prevent the cataclysmic consequences of heating Earth? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about this?
That's a good question. And I am going to again quote Emma Maris. because she responds to this. The climate crisis is not going to be solved by personal sacrifice. It will be solved by electing the right people, passing the right laws, drafting the right regulations, signing the right treaties, and respecting those treaties already signed. That's how it's going to happen.
Very true.
So I think this upcoming election may be the most important election in our history.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are there other issues your group is concerned about?
Before talking about that, if we have enough time, I want to talk. Okay. I want to talk about her suggestion that people will solve this problem when they organize and be with similar-minded people in groups. As I said, this is the most important election I think we've ever faced. Today, the letters of impeachment are being read in the Senate. And I, having taught history for now 20 years, cannot recall a more incompetent, misogynistic, racist, narcissistic president in my life, who is also an inveterate liar. Unbelievable. He has to be replaced.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to the Women's March this weekend
and that
in Washington.
Isn't it beautiful
and
example
I've been there before,
of what Meredith
and I've marched
said,
every
and
year.
I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of my wife. We worked on this sign. She's going to take it with a busload of people from Bay City and Saginaw that will be going to Washington.
Probably on that bus.
It's her third trip, and it is the reason why I am optimistic. Because of women, because of people of color, the LGBT organizations, progressives everywhere. We know in our past that we've experienced very difficult situations. Certainly the Great Depression, World War II, and we've risen above it and we've survived, even prospered. This is doable, and we have environmental examples.
And we don't need war to accomplish it.
No, we don't need war to accomplish it. We need to take extremely aggressive action. We need to have a Green New Deal. Absolutely, a Green New Deal.
I talked about that on Earth News.
Yes,
and I said that
absolutely.
This is common sense. People use your common your five senses.
We succeeded in banning lead in gasoline, which was an extreme success, and chlorofluorocarbons. We protected the ozone layer. We know how to do global treaties. We just have to have the will to do it, and we need lobbyists that are going to put pressure on our elected officials, and we have to select elected officials.
I think
who are
there's
committed
more
to doing
involvement politically than maybe ever in history in this country. I'm just seeing droves of people
in the free press,
involved, including myself.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I just saw an article in the Detroit Free Press that they expect huge numbers in this election. They are ordering more ballots.
And we're working hard to make sure people's voices are heard and not oppressed.
Yes, that's wonderful.
And gerrymandered.
Yes. So, are there any other issues? Yes, we're tracking a number of them, and I'm sure you've heard them, and they probably have been topics here. Line 5.
Oh, yeah.
We have got to stop Line 5. That never should have been built in the first place, and it's part of the system of oil usage, fossil fuel usage that has to be stopped.
That's why I supported Whitmer.
Nestle's.
Enbridge.
They should not be allowed to pump out 2,000 gallons a minute of, what is it, 200 gallons a minute of groundwater for a $200 fee. PFAS, the forever chemical.
Right.
You just saw in the paper 17
Right.
suits against companies
Yeah.
that have produced
Yeah,
it.
that's a big deal.
We've got to get that addressed. And of course, we have to continue the dioxin cleanup in the Tittabawassee. We have a meeting Monday on that because we're up to the confluence of the Saginaw River. And that seems to be a success. We'll check on the monitoring,
Awesome.
but Tittabawassee River could be a very great recreational area in the near future if
Restoring,
that's successful.
yeah.
Yes.
Well,
So-
thank you for everything that you've done to
Well,
help
thank you for
this
having me on here and for
Terry.
what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Coming from you, that's a high honor,
Oh,
Terry.
it's well
Thank you.
deserved.
Thank you. Well,
Yes.
that's it for today's Earth News. Until next time.
At the UN today, I have come here to say to this summit, how dare you? The lip service you pay, empty words, do you think that we are unaware? I am calling your bluff. And though your words sound tough, you're not doing enough. We'll be watching you, this is all wrong. I should be in school rather than up here. You have stolen my dreams and my childhood too with your empty words, yet I am one of the lucky ones. People suffer and die, they die. Ecosystems awry, we're in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of economic growth. How dare you! For more than 30 years the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight, nowhere in sight. You're not doing enough. You say that you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and how angry I am, I don't want to believe it, because if you really understood the situation and still kept failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe the popular idea of cutting our emissions in half in 10 years only gives us a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees and the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control. 50% may be acceptable to you, but those numbers do not include most tipping points, most feedback loops, additional warming hidden by toxic air pollution, or the aspects of equity and climate justice. They also rely on my generation, sucking hundreds of tons of your CO2 out of the air with technologies that barely exist. So a 50% risk is simply not acceptable to us. We who have to live with the consequences, to have a 67% chance of staying below a 1.5 degrees of global temperature rise, the best odds given by the IPCC. The world had 420 gigatons of CO2 left to emit back on January 1st, 2018. Today that figure is already down to less than 350 gigatons. How dare you pretend that this can be solved with just business as usual and some technical solutions with today's emissions levels. That remaining CO2 budget will be entirely gone within less than 8.5 years. There will not be any solutions or plans presented in line with these figures here today, because these numbers are too uncomfortable and you are still not mature enough to tell it like it is. You are failing us, but the young people are starting to understand your betrayal. The eyes of all future generations are upon you, and if you choose to fail us, I say we will never forgive you. We will not let you get away with this. Right here, right now is where we draw the line. The world is waking up and change is coming. Whether you like it or not. Thank you.
What do we want? Climate justice. When do we want it? Now. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Climate change has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Climate change has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Climate change has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Climate change has got to go.
We are water. We are all one. It connects and sustains us all, every living thing. Every polar bear and every single bee, flowing through our veins and flowing to the sea. We are one. We are water. Water is life. We are one. We are water. Water is life. Money means nothing without a drop to drink. Crops can't grow without that precious link. Water is the key to life. It always needs to be. Above all else, our most protected legacy. We are one. We are water. Water is life. We are one. We are water. Water is life. Check the water. Save our Great Lakes. Check the water. Save our city of Flint. Protect the water. Save our stand